Welcome to another episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. Today we are joined with our good friend Noi Calhoun from JAG Construction in Asheville, North Carolina. And broadly, we talk about the Hurricane Helene devastation on Asheville and surrounding areas. If you're curious how builders, community members, and just generally people made it through that devastating event, this is the podcast for you to tune into. Let's go ahead and dive in. Noi, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today. Why don't we just go ahead and start with you doing a little bit of an introduction for the listeners today. Tell them who you are, where you're from, the company you work for, the work you do, just some of the basics.
Sure. My name is Noi Calhoun. I'm the general manager and one of the owners for JAG Construction. We are a green built company based out of Asheville, North Carolina.
Beautiful country up there. Beautiful country up there. You guys do great work. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that hits very close to home for you guys with Hurricane Helene. And your guys' experience with that. I mean, I think you'd mentioned before you guys are just crossing the 6-month mark of the devastation. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, Thursday will be officially the 6-month mark. But 6 months ago today, I evacuated my house because the power had already gone out. And so it started then for sure.
Yeah. Dang. Yeah. Obviously a very widely followed devastation in the country, but even like primarily from like your view as like a builder, like tell us a little bit how you navigate that situation as a business owner, as an employer, as an owner of a company that has clients with projects going. Like tell us a little about what that looked like for you guys immediately.
Wow. Okay. So immediately we were all lost and we couldn't talk to each other. Actually,
Dang.
So it was hell. So truthfully, like I said, 6 months ago today, I evacuated my house because the power had already gone out, and we went over to my boyfriend, now fiance's house, to be closer to his dad, who has some medical issues. My boy, he said, I have a bad feeling about this when the power went out at my house, and he's like, let's just go. So we did. The next day, that was a Wednesday night. So the next day, Thursday, I actually didn't even go into work because there was so much water on the roads that I personally didn't really feel comfortable driving. I'm from Colorado. I'm used to river crossings on a 4-wheel drive trail, but not the whole highway being a river.
Yeah.
I was not excited. So I just said, I can work from home that day. And that night, the power went out at my fiance's house. And that was really when everything really became devastating. The overnight Thursday into Friday was when the winds came. The winds were 140 miles an hour. It took out so many trees. And then once the rain stopped, that's when the landslides and the flooding started to happen. So as I said, I didn't even go to work the day before because the roads were covered in water. There was no place for the water to go. And it overflowed the reservoirs, it overflowed the dams, and the land couldn't hold it anymore. And there were mudslides everywhere, landslides everywhere. And then on top of that, you have the fact that the French Broad River, which runs right through the middle of Asheville, it's one of the oldest rivers in the world. I think they said it's like the 3rd oldest river in the world, but its waters run backwards. So the waters flow.
Interesting.
The waters flow from south to north, which means that everything that Helene had thrown at us just kept adding in. to the river that runs right through the middle of downtown or through the center. And it wiped out everything. I don't know what the height was as it went through Asheville per se. I reside in Marshall, which is about 20 miles northwest of Asheville, and it hit 27 feet when it went through Marshall.
Wait, that was the flow, the depth.
Yes, sir.
Of the water.
It was hitting the second floor of the hotel that's right by the river in Marshall. Yes, sir. 27 feet.
Wow. That's insane. That's insane. I've
number one. Yeah.
What's that?
I said, cue the tears number one. 27 feet. They were expecting 23. That was the previous record. And it went over that by 4 foot.
Holy cow.
Have you ever experienced anything like this? I know obviously not to this degree, but have you had to evacuate before, or was this the first time in your life where you've had to evacuate from a hurricane?
Ooh, so being from Colorado, I have been through forest fires before, but this was my first hurricane and hopefully my last.
Yes. Wait, was this what part of Colorado were you from, Noe?
I actually graduated from Mancus High School, which is a tiny little town close to the Mesa Verde National Park.
Okay.
But I lived in Durango as well.
Love it. I've actually rafted the Dolores River.
Nice. Yes.
Yeah. It's a good river. Flows, but not that big. That's insane. We have an employee, Ben Danielson. Shout out to Ben. He's in Forest City, so that's outside of Charlotte. Is that right? Maybe it's a small town. He actually went up. So he was a Marine before, and he went up to help with the devastation. And he shared very similar stories. Just like he would go up with cases of food and water and help people get out of their homes. Like he said, it was an absolute mess.
Yeah. I mean, so Friday morning when we went out just to go see, we kind of knew nobody was expecting us to be at work. So we just went out to go see. My fiance lives about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the post office in that municipality called Barnardsville. We got down the driveway, had to do some irrigation. There was some hella runoff and stuff. Looking out, there were a lot of trees down. It was looking pretty bad. And then we got to the bridge that was no longer a bridge.
Just completely wiped out.
And it was fallen. It had died on one side, was still holding on one side, but obviously you couldn't get close across it. So that was when we kind of... Go ahead.
I was going to say, so you said Thursday was when you said Thursday was when you evacuated from which day of the week was when you evacuated from your house?
So Wednesday night was when I left my house. Power was out there. Thursday night was when the power went out at my fiance's house. And Friday morning is when we found the bridge collapsed.
And so that 27 feet of height of the water flowing through Marshall, which day was that?
That was Friday morning. Yeah.
Friday morning. Okay. And where were you guys at that point relative to Marshall? Like, where were you staying at?
So Barnardsville is probably 15 miles the other direction. Still, instead of northwest of Asheville, which is where Marshall is, Barnardsville is more northeast a little.
Okay.
But it devastated everything around here. I mean, everything.
What was the diameter? Yeah, like how far out did it go?
I mean, the flooding was fairly centralized to the French Broad or to each individual river. But the problem was, in Barnardsville, there's 3 creeks that run into town, and one creek just completely washed out everything. And it took out homes, roads. There was an entire trailer park that just got wiped out. And that's just one of many. There is a whole, they called it Cragtown, which was a little community down in Fairview, just south of Asheville. And they called it Cragtown because a whole family lived in the same little holler. Mm-hmm. That family lost members in a landslide. It was crazy. And Friday, when we got to the bridge and we realized that the bridge was out and we needed to reassess our plan about how we were going to move forward, that was also when all communications went down. All cell phone towers went out. We had no phone, no internet. Emergency responders were using walkie-talkies and CB radios.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, so there's not a lot of options, but like, what do you do? Do you just accept like you can't communicate with people? Like, what? Like,
yeah.
And you, so I would imagine like you just like try and help people around you, or just stay safe. What do you do?
So it did become a very micro community oriented situation. There were, I mean, literally they just rednecked the bridge. Somebody from up the road drove their excavator down and started taking up the bridge and redoing it so that people could still get across. That was, I think, 3 days in. It was a couple, 3 days after when we started hearing reports that some radio DJs locally had managed to make it to the station. They had one radio station up and running. They were going off of a generator. They were providing us with as much emergency information as we could get. That's when we learned that I-40 had fallen off the side of the hill and that 26 North had also had a bridge collapse. And so people couldn't even get supplies to us unless they were being airdropped.
Dang.
Wow.
Yeah, what a weird parallel universe when people from the mountains are fleeing to the coast from a hurricane.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the bizarre part about the hurricane, wasn't it? Like this had, I actually know you said historically, I think the record was 23 feet. Is Asheville known for getting like slammed with this type of scenario?
No, it is not known for getting slammed with this type of scenario. The 23-foot crest was from 1903.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was 1,000-year storm. This doesn't happen very often at all.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead.
Oh, but it wiped out communications. We couldn't talk to anybody. It wiped out all the power everywhere. It actually took out the city of Asheville's water. Took them 7 weeks to restore water.
Well, how did you get water, like, and food during this time period? What was that like?
Okay, so there were a couple different things. First of all, the Army National Guard came in, started giving out emergency supplies. Some of that box water is actually really good. Get used to it. So we started getting some of those. We actually were lucky enough. We had just started working on 2 jobs side by side for an investor client of ours. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get hooked up to the system. And we had installed a well there. So almost immediately we got a big old water tank, and we would just go fill that up with water from the well from this job site and start taking it around town and sharing it with anybody who needed it. We would just put out there that we're going to be at, West Asheville, corner of Vermont, whatever. And we'd wait there and people would just come fill up, and then we'd go back and do it again.
Well, I think that's like when you mentioned like the micro community, I mean, like nothing is taking away from, again, the word is devastating as this is, but like when you look back on that, Noe, was it moving to see just how people came together quickly? I guess I would assume like immediately to help the community, or what was your take on that?
It was absolutely amazing. Asheville is a large enough city that those little micro communities took care of each other in that way. The town that I live in Marshall, it's so mountainous.
Mm-hmm.
It's so mountainous that there's only the one little downtown area. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have Big Pine, Little Pine, where I live, you know, all little haulers basically. And that's just how you go. And so everybody in that holler was just looking out for each other at every time. We did get a lot of church groups coming in, doing free lunches and stuff like that. That was really, really amazing. Just the ability for people to look out for each other and do wellness checks. And it's heartwarming to see. It's horrible that it has to be a devastation to see it.
Right. To get that type of reaction from a community. Would you, okay, and we're coming up on 6 months here. Would you say that that's carried? Like that sense of community has carried? Has that impacted the community in like a positive way of like knowing your neighbors and helping people out? Like, what would you say that side effect has looked like?
Very true. Yeah. You know, a lot of those little subdivisions or little neighborhoods, they all really got to know each other and figure out their resources in that small amount of time. And they may not have known their neighbors' names before that because you moved to a town and you don't think that's going to be the thing. Right. There's not much taking your neighbor a plate of cookies anymore. So this was their chance to get to know each other. And yes, it has definitely prevailed throughout. And the greater spirit of rebuilding has been really hopeful.
Yeah.
To see.
And so when did you start? I guess, you know, focus on the, I guess, rebuilding side of things. When did that start? You know, like when did you start to field calls from JAG to actually help rebuild structures? What was that like? And when did it start?
Right. The power was out probably for 13 or 14 days. I'm sure I'm getting a little incorrect on that. But during that time, we weren't getting any phone calls. We couldn't do any banking. We couldn't do much of anything except just kind of try to hold on and get everybody that was still in town back to the office for a quick powwow. I think it would have been a week later. I think it was the next Friday we all got in here. And there were lots of hugs, lots and lots of hugs, which was awesome. And then we figured out, okay, we had to make sure that all of our contracted houses were safe and secure. We just started going from there. We were fortunate. We had about 30 houses on the board altogether between our new builds and our remodels, and only 2 of them had any damage. None of them were flooded.
Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
How did that happen with just, you know, we talked about the devastation earlier. How did it end up where so many of the houses that you guys were building were safe?
I'm going to say sheer luck on the one hand, and also none of them were in the flood zone. Perhaps it was really just tree damage. So
yeah.
Wow.
Okay. And then, so you guys had a lot of projects in the ground before the hurricane came through. Obviously, the hurricane caused a bunch of devastation, requiring a lot of new work. Did you guys say like, hey, we're going to hire a bunch more people and staff up so we can take this work on? Or did you? No. We made the determination pretty quickly that we were not going to take on any storm jobs. There's lots of other companies and contractors in our area that can and are willing to do so. That is not something that we have done traditionally, and we knew that we still had enough work on our plate. We did talk to some of our subs because I was fielding a lot of calls. So I did talk to a few of our subs to see which one of them I could which one of them I could recommend or not, and see. As a team, we tried best to help everybody, but we just couldn't take on most of it. And considering that it's now 6 months later and I don't know a single person who has received their FEMA money, it's probably a good thing we're not holding out.
Yeah. What is it? So the restoration contractors, when you say they can take on that type of work, what are the specifics required to be able to take on that type of work?
Having the ability to wait until FEMA pays or the insurance pays.
So basically, if you have a bunch of cash, then you can take on restoration work. Is what you're saying? That's basically
kind of. You have to have enough capital to do the work and wait for reimbursement for sure.
And then, are there any special skills required in terms of restoration? I mean, I imagine, right? There's got to be like maybe damage assessment or like particular
remediation, mold remediation, all kinds of stuff.
Mold remediation is definitely going to be the biggest factor of it here for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's it been like for you just generating, I guess, some of the other knock-on effects of this, generating new business now in the wake of this disaster? Are there a lot fewer homes being built? Are there, are people not?
It got real slow for a hot minute, and that's understood. I mean, who wants to try to build a home in a war zone?
Sure.
That was slow for a little bit. I think even though the reconstruction and revival is moving a little bit slower than I think most people would hope for, it does seem like springtime is going to come back positive.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a lady who runs a hotel downtown, and she said that during the hurricane, they had October is a really, really busy time as far as tourists for Asheville because of the leaves. Mm-hmm. And she said that she had 3 or 4 weddings cancel that were scheduled for October because they knew that this was not the right time. But at least half of them rescheduled for the spring. So we're hopeful we're going to start seeing some people again. We also were dealing with a situation where the governor himself said, please don't come to North Carolina. We're trying to do stuff. We had mayors of municipalities telling their people at town hall meetings, if you have somewhere else to go, you should do it because that's one more person I can scratch off my checklist, or whatever. Now we're past that and we need to recoup the loss. I mean, there was billions of dollars of tourist money lost for sure.
Yeah. And so there was tons and tons of devastation from this hurricane. If you drive around Asheville today, you drive around Marshville, can you tell? Or have things been mostly rebuilt? You can.
Nothing looks the same. Nothing.
And so when you think nothing looks the same, is it still like kind of devastated, or are you saying there's just new buildings everywhere and like kind of freshly painted structures and stuff like that?
There's not a lot of new buildings. Anyone who lost their home or had their home condemned, I guess, by FEMA in the aftermath, they're not building a new home. They either had a tiny home donated to them, they had an RV donated to them, or some rare occasions there's been a modular home or a trailer. Most of these people can't afford to just build a new house, and they certainly probably haven't gotten the insurance or the FEMA money to do it yet. So
yeah. So it's just a lot of empty spaces now, or
there's attempts at rebuilding for sure. New Belgium is back open. They were on the river. They got destroyed, but they are back open in limited capacity. A lot of the businesses here had to do a whole bunch of mold remediation, rebuilding, etc.
you know, Asheville, I think, had a little less of it. Most of those industries down on the river either chose to not rebuild or were larger companies and corporations like O'Reilly Auto Parts or things like that.
Yeah.
We did have one of our contracted houses had a custom all cherry trim package that was being built by or being milled by a company that was down on the river, and that whole custom trim package went floating away.
Dang. How do you handle that? What is that? Just sorry, insurance? Like, what happens?
They actually were big enough to just say, look, we knew we had this contract. We're going to make it right. We're going to do everything we can to help make it right. And us continuing to have faith in them gave them the ability to rebuild. And they still knew they were going to get, you know, X amount of thousands more dollars for this package if they could just produce the material. And they are running, and we just got that trim delivered this week.
Awesome.
Wow.
You guys should post about it. You guys have Instagram, Noi?
Yes.
You should post a picture of that trim package. I'd be curious to see it.
Yes, it is gorgeous. It is gorgeous.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
With the story behind it.
It's
with the story behind it.
Yeah.
It's been a ride.
Wow.
I can imagine.
Thanks. And, you know, one of the things that was big to us is we have created a system of payment here at JAG where we pay all of our subs and vendors every Thursday, which is almost unheard of, but we're a small company in a smallish town, and we have the ability to do it. And as long as the PM approves it and says you've done the work, if you put your bill into our system by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, we'll cut you a check on Thursday. And we know a lot of these little subs need that check on Thursday to make payroll Friday or Monday. And we had to get back, and we had to put our subs back to work after Helene so that they could continue to put their people to work or put food on their table for their family.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, people don't often think about the ripple effects of holding back payment. It's like someone else's family who can't put food on the table. Yeah, at the end of the day. Are you guys able to collect from your customers weekly?
We invoice our customers bi-weekly.
Okay, bi-weekly. Okay. And do you just anticipate your cost that will be coming up in the next 2 weeks so you can kind of get ahead of that, or do you just basically float the money for a week before collecting from your customers?
We pretty much just float it. We've got a very reliable flow of income. Actually, right after Helene, you know, I'm kind of the fiduciary responsible person for JAG. So after Helene, they were like, all right, who owes us money? Who can we hit up right now? You know, who do we know that's a good payer, a fast payer? Who can we hit up? And I just started sending out emails saying, look, as soon as I can get power back on, you can expect an invoice from me. Please be patient and hopeful while we rebuild Asheville.
Yeah.
So how did that work? Because you mentioned, like, did you say nearly a 2 week period of no power?
That's correct.
So like, how do you, I guess, what did you do? Or did that hit your timeline of typically receiving money? I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, how did that impact income and payables for you guys?
Well, on top of the fact that we had no power to invoice them, the banks didn't have power to accept our money, even if money to give them. So it was.
Go ahead.
It was a rough moment in history. Yes.
Totally. But so I guess, does that mean because like banks didn't have, assuming, power just to operate, you didn't have power to send invoices? Was it kind of just like because everyone was out, like they just basically like it stopped for the 2 weeks completely? And then once it was ready to go, everything else just kind of picked up. Was there that much of a skip of a beat because everyone was out, or?
It kind of was, yeah. Everything and everything was just on hold, and everyone was just kind of walking around in a daze for the first couple weeks. Yeah.
Wild. I think this is really interesting, and even primarily, I mean, it's like, yes, Helene for sure, and it's still ongoing, but even like the fires in California, like I was we were in Vegas for the Builder Show, and I was there even just last weekend, and we were talking to some people. Well, actually, my buddy's dad is a real estate broker up in the Santa Clarita Valley, and so he knows a lot of people down in like LA that got just crushed with this stuff. And it is just fascinating how these small businesses, and specifically contractors in these areas that get impacted with this just disaster and natural causes and issues, how do you survive? How do you make it? And it sounds like broadly it was just like the good faith and positive mindset and like going back to basics when the opportunity came up is really what it sounds like.
Yeah, for the first couple weeks, we weren't really doing construction. We were delivering water. We were doing wellness checks. We were taking care of the community, finding each other, and making sure everybody was safe. That was it.
Yeah. And then I guess to kind of like wrap it up, obviously you went through like a big challenge here, like massive challenge that most people won't face in their lifetimes. Like what do you think is the biggest? I mean, this is like, on a relative basis, probably much smaller, but like, what do you think is the biggest, just for the other business owners out there? Like, what do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing in your construction business right now that you're trying to address?
That people need to know that Asheville is back open for business. We're still here.
The
so
demand you were talking about earlier. Go back.
It kind of went by the wayside there, and I understand it looked scary as hell, but we're back. So
all right, we're back. You heard it here, not first, but you heard it here.
Asheville is back. Asheville, and it sounds like there's a promising horizon. It sounds like there's a promising horizon.
Actually, there's quite a few places that are opening up this week as the 6-month anniversary thing. They've managed to pull it off and get back open in this time frame. There were a few businesses that didn't make it through that 7 or 8 weeks without water, and I think every business has had a few employees who just decided they didn't want to be here anymore, and that's understandable too. But for the most part, those that are still here are resilient. So
that's right.
All right, Asheville,
that's wild. Incredible story, Noe. We appreciate you for hopping on the podcast. We wish you the best in the coming months and a bright future.
Thanks. Come see us.
Yes, we actually should. I've actually never been. My dad is a born and raised North Carolinian. He grew up in Greenville, but I've never been to Asheville. I've heard it's beautiful. I have a buddy in Charlotte that loves spending time in Asheville. I've heard nothing but great things. But I need to make a trip out there.
I've always heard great about Asheville.
Yeah. But cool. Well, we appreciate you, Noe. Thank you for the time, and thanks for joining Builders, Budgets, and Beers.